started recording. Sure thing.
Thank you. And so everybody here, let me just first introduce myself. I'm Roman McAllen. I don't think I know everyone, but I know a few people. And I joined the city about a year ago. I'm a native Houstonian, but I left for, I think, around 15 years and got a master's degree in architecture and studied preservation at the University of Texas. And I've been working in preservation since 2012, 4 years in Brownsville with a federally funded facade improvement grant program, working on buildings there, as well as urban revitalization in Cameron County there in Brownsville, which is one of the poorest counties in Texas. And so from there, I was recruited up to Denton, Texas, where I was a preservation officer for somewhere over 3 years and did a different type of work. And it's kind of odd because Denton is the second wealthiest county in Texas if you take the small ones out. So I've had a diverse amount of work, and I'm on the board of Preservation Texas, where I've been there for, I think, 4 or 5 years and maybe have another year left on the board. I care passionately about Houston and everything about it and for its people. And so this is exciting for me to have a task force to look at this idea of conservation districts. But before we get started, I'd like to ask the members of the task force to just introduce themselves and maybe say what they do professionally, and then if you have a role within the city, as on a commission or a committee. And I'll just start at the top of the list. I have Steve Curry here. Steve Curry, would you mind please saying hello?
Hello, Roman and everyone. I'm glad to be here today. Glad to see everybody.
And Steve, just in case others don't know, could you say what you do professionally and if you have another role at the city?
Sure, I'm glad to. I'm a practicing architect here in Houston, Curry Boudreaux Architects. I lead the not-for-profit advocacy group, Houston Mod, advocating for a mid-century mod in our recent history. And I'm a commissioner on the Houston Archaeological and Historical Commission.
Thank you so much, Steve. Thank you. Zion Escobar, would you introduce yourself, please?
Yes. Hi, I'm Zion Escobar, and I am the executive director of the Houston Friedman's Town Conservancy. So as you know, we have many, many assets and an entire community to preserve. And so we're incredibly grateful to be here, and we're excited to have this conversation, and we're looking forward to the actions and outcomes and next step from this focus group / task force.
I'm muted. Zion, did you mention your profession? I'm sorry if you did. I just want to make sure everybody knows what people do.
Right.
Otherwise.
So as my background before becoming the executive director of the Houston Friedman's Town Conservancy, my background is civil engineering, specifically infrastructure and stormwater, water management, land development, sustainable infrastructure, and equity planning.
Thank you so much, Zion. Thank you. Did Robert Friedman make the meeting? Robert Peterline, sorry, Peterline, did you make the meeting? I don't think he did. We'll keep an eye out for him. Peter Friedman, please, would you say hello and introduce yourself?
Hey, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Peter Friedman. I am the Director of Housing for Agape Development Ministries and Agape Home CDC. We are a organization that's focused on the greater OST South Union area. We're building affordable housing. I've been at my position here for about 2.5 years, and we plan to build at least 75 new homes in the area and do some other rental options as well. But before this, I've been in this position about 2.5 years. Before this, I've held several roles in the for-profit side. So I've kind of got can wear both hats and look at the items we're looking at in the task force from both perspectives. So I'm excited to have some input. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Omar Isvar, have you been able to make the meeting? Omar?
We did just have a phone number join the chat. I'm not sure who that is.
Phone number?
That's Kirby Lou.
Oh, Kirby Lou, okay. Kirby Lou is visiting as a guest. Thank you for joining us very much. So no Omar. Maybe he's got a case. Meg Lustro, I know Meg, but would you please introduce yourself to?
Sure. Hi, everybody. My name is Meg Lusto. I am the interim director of Row House Community Development Corporation, and we do affordable housing in Houston's 3rd Ward. Part of our charge is also to enhance the concept of community over there. And of course, as a preservationist, I believe strongly that retaining the historic resources in that neighborhood is key to that, which is why I'm so excited to be a part of this committee. I came to Houston to work for the National Trust for Historic Preservation, and my career has been in preservation. So I'm especially eager to meet all of you that I don't already know. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you, Meg. So David Abraham may not have joined still. So we're 3 down on the actual members. And then Matthew Camp. Mr. Camp, did you make it?
No, we
Okay.
don't have him on. I have somebody with the name Rob. I'm not sure the last name.
Maybe Mr. Hellyer.
Oh, I see. Okay, got it.
And who's
Thank
next?
you.
Actually, Rob, would you like to introduce yourself, please?
Sure, I'll go next. My name is Rob Hellyer. I own a residential remodeling company. I'm located in the Houston Heights, in one of 2 properties in the Heights South Historic District, currently repurposing a 1920s drugstore into a single-family home for my wife and I. And I'm the 2020 president of the Greater Houston Builders Association and an 8-year former member of the Houston Archaeological and Historical Commission as the first remodeler builder member.
You're muted, Roman. You're muted.
Thank you, Zion. I think those are the official members that are, on the focus group. That being said, we're down 3 people, and I'll do my best to update them with what we cover today. That being said, I do see some other people that are in attendance, and I want to be respectful of everyone's time, but also I just want to allow, I think I saw Carl Davis maybe in there. I'm not sure. Look, here's the thing. Who's ever in attendance that would just like to say hello, could you maybe raise your hand by hitting the button on the screen? And I see, okay, Sherry Smith is here. Sherry Smith, good. Would you like to say hello? Please introduce yourself.
Hello, my name is Cherie Smith. I teach at Texas Southern University, really some of the history and theory courses. We're here in the 3rd Ward. So I'm excited to at least be listening in and visiting with you all.
We're so glad to have you, Cherie. I know we've had trouble reaching one another, and we have mutual interest in this great city of ours. So thank you. Mr. Lou, Kirby Lou, you made real good comments in the meeting yesterday. So would you please say hello and introduce yourself?
Yes, hi, I'm Kirby Lou with Lovett, and as many of you may know, we do residential development, and we also do commercial development. And yeah, I'm very excited to be part of the conversation today, or observe the conversation today.
Thank you so much, and I'm sorry, Mr. Garza is next. Your hand is raised. Please say hello and introduce yourself. Thank you.
Yes, good afternoon. This is Sonny Garza. I'm co-chair of the subcommittee and vice chair of Houston Planning Commission. And unlike the rest of you, my background is marketing. So I have to tell you, we're very pleased to have such an august and diverse group of all of you on this subcommittee. It is all of you who are going to make these changes happen and bring your voice to City Council to be heard. So we appreciate all of you being part of this. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sonny. The next hand up has C. Davis here. I'll just say, please introduce yourself, sir.
Sure, I'm Curtis Davis. I'm a member of the Livable Cities Committee. I'm the former project manager for the Emancipation Community Development Partnership in the 3rd Ward. Having worked with Project Row Houses. I'm on the steering committee for the Northern Third Ward Neighborhood Planning Initiative. I'm an architect and an urban planner. Recently moved back to Houston in the past 11 years. I'm also a member of the Houston Housing Collaborative. I'm just working on a lot of network building around community development in town right now.
Mr. Davis, personally, I'm honored to have you here, and I heard you speak at the Texas Real Places Conference, I believe, a couple of years ago. Yeah. It was an extremely eye-opening and informative and useful presentation. Amazing. I'm honored to have you here. Thank you.
Thank you.
I see another hand, Lisa Clark.
Hi, thanks for giving me a minute, Roman. I am the co-chair with Sunny. Sunny pretty much said all the thoughts that I had. I just wanted to take a second and thank all of you for your time and your dedication to this city. My background, I'm on Planning Commission. I've been on Planning Commission since 2011. I serve on several committees here and there for the city and for the various counties around here. And my profession, I'm a residential developer. So I appreciate this. This is really important. And I look forward to observing the good work that you all are going to be doing. So thank you, Roman. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much. I see another hand is Sandra Stevens.
Hi, I'm Sandra Stevens, and I am a member of the Livable Places Action Committee and very excited to be a part of that group. And I don't have a background in planning or development, but I am a retired educator, and I serve currently as president of Museum Park Neighborhood Association. And I too am really excited to see what this committee will be, this focus group will be doing, because our neighborhood has seen immense changes in the last 20 years, and some of them wonderful and some of them not so wonderful. So forward to being a part, watching on as this focus group moves forward. Thank you.
Ms. Stevens, you broke up when you said what neighborhood association you were with. Could you repeat that, please?
Yes, Museum Park Neighborhood Association.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you to everybody who took the time to join us. I don't see any other hands, and I'll just ask my staff to please keep checking the chat in case someone's having audio problems. So now back to the topic, which is conservation districts. I know they've been talked about in the past in Houston. I have no formal presentation. I have documents and items that I'm going to bring up and share with you. But as a way of introduction, conservation districts are a normal tool used under the Chapter 211, I believe, of the Texas Local Government Code, which allows cities to protect districts, to protect landmarks, to protect historic property or areas, etc. Now, Houston, because it doesn't have zoning, doesn't operate under Chapter 211. We do have a historic preservation ordinance, however, and it presently does not have a conservation district language in it. I tried as hard to find a copy of the old language. Someone has wrote, Kim Mickelson reminded me, it's not Chapter 211. No, and we're not, that's not what we're talking about. I know that, but Kim, if you're there, if you want to correct me, just jump right in there. I just wanted to comment that that's where you hear about that type of thing, but Houston doesn't operate under that at all. And unless I'm just saying the wrong chapter, Kim, maybe I don't remember what the local government code. And she says all is good, so she's chatting. So then with that in mind, when I arrived in Houston, I thought about Friedman's Town, and I thought about Emancipation Avenue and Starkweather and neighborhoods that weren't protected but clearly had historic resources and a significant cultural history that they should have a conservation district on them. Initially, it seemed like there wasn't receptivity to creating them, but now there is. And so now we're having this conversation, and I hope that by early January, we'll have an ordinance that all of y'all would be okay with. And that an ordinance is simply an ordinance which would enable the city to make conservation districts, not actually make them. That's not the job of this task force. This task force simply look at this concept and hopefully agree that it's a good idea and agree with the draft ordinance. Look, I already have a draft ordinance and that I've just barely touched on, but it's really wide open at this point. So let me back up and talk. Let me go ahead and share my screen, and I'm going to go over to, give me 1 second here. Let me get what I want up here. And let me try it again. It didn't do what I wanted. And I think, hold on, sorry, one pile technology getting me. I'm not seeing what I want to share with you. Got it here. Let me just try one more time. No. Y'all hang on. I've never had this before. Let's see. Open share tray. I'm getting a weird share tray. Let's see. 1 second. Surely it won't do this for me. Let me figure it out here. All right, one more try. Close this. Close the share tray. I'm trying to share with you all my Google, and it just isn't working. Let me see. Let me figure out recording. Team, y'all gonna I don't have to ask everybody. Hang on 1 second. Let me jump over to the city laptop that I've got right next to me, and it'll cooperate a lot better than what I'm doing. So everybody, just hang on a second. We're having to group over to this, get this up. I'm going to join this meeting from my other machine, so I'm going to mute this mic. Okay, I'm back, and I am almost there. All right, I think I got it. All right, y'all. So sorry for that delay. You hear me okay?
Yes.
Great, thank you. So I'm over to this other screen. I want to start by saying conservation districts are not a new concept. This is the City of Dallas's webpage pertaining to conservation districts. They've had them since 1988. Now, what are they? It explains it really well here, and that's why I brought this up. It explains here that these districts are similar to, but quite different from historic districts. Whereas a historic district looks to preserve the original structures as they were, or in their with their historical integrity. With respect typically to conservation districts, you are maintaining standards in an area, typically. Now, I will say that cities vary in what they protect. And so just in general, that's the way to look at it. Now, also for me, and what's important here and what I think our opportunity is to set a new standard and talk about you really make sure we're talking about the cultural history of a place. So there's really a lot to encompass here. And in Houston, when you think about Emancipation Avenue and when you think about Friedman's Town, you have different neighborhoods. So Friedman's Town with its brick streets, which have already been protected by the mayor, but also it, you know, and is a national registered district. However, a district in which let me back up. Part of the reason this is so important that we do, and the work that all of you will support, is that Friedmanstown had over 500 buildings in it when it was created as when it was listed on the National Registry. It had over 500 contributing buildings. I drove on my bike half of the district, and in my car the other half. It didn't take long, and there are now somewhere less than 50 structures that are there, and they didn't get protected. Now, the politics of why they weren't protected is I don't want to speak to. I do understand the economics of it. If you have a rental property that is an old shotgun house that someone's renting for a few $100s, obviously the property taxes on that property wouldn't be too high as compared to a $400,000, $500,000 townhome or two on one lot. So from the city's point of view, over those decades, maybe that's what they were looking at. But I feel like for us today, it's to say, well, here we are today. What can we do to protect these resources? So that's the Dallas information. And a key feature of the Dallas part here is that with historic districts, and this is true in the city of Houston with our ordinance, if you want to change the exterior of a building that's contributing in the district, really any building in the district, it has to be reviewed either by staff or by the historic Houston Archaeological Historical Commission, the commission. And typically in the case of Dallas here, you'll notice that Dallas says that the reviews of conservation district work is done by staff members only, and it can be done a lot quicker. So I wanted to share that with you, and since I can't bring it up from this other machine, which isn't cooperating, I'm just going to do a quick, let me think of how to pull this up now. I've saved it in different places. I want to comment that, let me just say that San Antonio has a similar ordinance with similar information in it. And also, I want to bring your attention, and I can see this other screen, so I think y'all are following me along. I'm going over to the City of Denton's municipal code, and I'm putting in Conservation District, because I helped to modify this ordinance. Conservation districts got somewhat of a bad name over the last several years, and that was related to people would say, well, they're just exactly like a historic district, so you have all that same regulation. So when we drafted this ordinance with community input in Denton, Texas, we modified it a little bit, and I want to share with you a couple sections of this ordinance. I have a note to tell you about 293C1. C1 is this. This is how we defined it in Denton. The purpose of a historic or conservation is to geographically define areas possessing significant concentration, linkage, or continuity of building structures, sites, areas, or land, which are united by architectural, historical, archaeological, cultural importance. And this may include a group of lands. So you can actually lay this around other already landmarked properties. I wanted to share with you that. And then the criteria, it can be as simple as having a common streetscape or a similar spatial relationship. That's important to recognize. And then I wanted to call out to your attention 292B3. No, that's not it. 292 here, sorry, 292B3. So here, what we did when I rewrote the ordinance in Denton is we got this ordinance to be more useful now because we specified that the conservation districts differ from historic districts in that they may be created to protect physical attributes of the area, and they may not or may be architectural. So I wanted to share that with you. And what else do I want to share? Talk to you about San Antonio. Now, so I think in essence, if I, now I don't know where to look because I've got you, so I'm going to find a screen over here and stop sharing and say to you, what we've done is, that's the general. Now, is there a question in anyone's mind about the difference between a historic district and a conservation district? And I'll just listen, if anyone wants to raise their hand. I say Zion is the question. Thank you.
Yes. If I could, I have it's maybe less of a question and more of a thought prompt for folks. Just because I sensed, I'm also on the Livable Places committee, and so I heard some of the initial comments and interest in having this conversation. I wanted to just add a different set of perspectives about everything you just shared, and say there's several different filters in which one can put this through. So I come from a background of pro-development. However, I am currently the executive director of a historic district which needs protections in certain key areas. And so I wanted to share with you just a little bit of insight to balance some of the conversation before we jump into things. So when you think about conservation districts and we're talking about them, there are historic districts in Friedmanstown, just as Roman said, and thank you, Roman, for mentioning Friedmanstown. When we think about conservation districts going forward, we put on that other hat, we think about the fact that, for instance, there are incredible historic assets that this community is going to be a UNESCO World Heritage Site in the future, right? So everyone should know that. This community is going to be at the head of the Emancipation National Historic Trail, which is a bill signed by President Trump and a bipartisan effort between our Congresswoman and our Senator to get that law passed. That's going to be a trail from Galveston up to Friedmanstown. And so when we talk about preservation and why someone would preserve, the intent is that this is going to be a very, very special tourist destination. And so you need to have something there. You don't need it all gone within 5 years. And as you've heard, going from 500 to 50 is pretty drastic. And so what we're trying to do is keep the last 50, it may not even be 50 total, to be honest with you, intact, and relieve it from threats of demolition. And people there want to stay in their homes. They want this opportunity to recognize the heritage and the history. So this is not just about keeping everything exactly as it was built 100 years ago. It's ensuring that the fabric stays intact so that there is something to visit for the next 50 years plus. When this is, in the next 10 years, it'll be a UNESCO World Heritage Site, but we need to have these legal protections there in order to gain UNESCO designation. So think about that as it's not just preventing development, it's allowing development to proceed, but trying to balance how that proceeds, but it's not unchecked, and it's not an opportunity to do a full demo of a community that has value in other ways. And I'll hush.
Very useful. Thank you. Thank you. And we have another hand up by Kirby Liu.
Hi.
Mr.
Yes, sorry, can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Yes. So my question is, because there's a lot of parts of the Friedmanstown fabric that is currently open lots that don't have a structure on them right now, and if you have a conservation district over the area as opposed to attaching, let's say, a specific status to certain contributing structures, how will that affect the design and density of open lots that don't have a structure on them? And I ask that because it seems maybe perhaps a bit inauthentic to try to replicate, certain aspects of the historic structures in Friedmanstown and sort of shotgun style houses, and also may not serve sort of broader needs for greater housing and closer in housing for people of a variety of income levels.
Sure.
I'm sorry. May I address that, or did someone else want to say something there?
No, go ahead, Roman. I didn't know if he was addressing that specifically to me, but feel free and I can add on.
Oh, okay. Well, let me use that opportunity, Mr. Liu, and I know you reminded me that of another document I wanted to share, so I'm going to see if I can bring it up now. This is a document that it dates to about 2018, I believe, and Margaret is on the director of planning, and Ms. Lynn worked on this. Lynn Henson, I'm sorry, worked on this. Now, this, you talk about what you can do. Really, this committee will draft an ordinance that enables the city to make a conservation district. But one thing is, you noted back on the Dallas, Dallas had another document that explained that each district is distinct, and there may be a different reason why you're creating it, what you're trying to protect, and whether you want to actually control or have influence over the new construction, Mr. Liu, like you're saying. So if you look back, I wanted to point out from this important document that mentions that it was that Third Ward, one of the complete communities, expressly asked for conservation districts through the Third Ward Policy and Program Landscape Report prepared for the Emancipation Avenue Development Partnership. So that just to know that there was that out there. Now, at this time, Lynn had put together, I believe, this document that talked about that what types of things one might protect or regulate, if you will, in a proposed district. So it talks about this as being some options. I just want to share with you that, Mr. Liu, that the district can be what you need it to be, if that makes sense. If you're dealing with a really small area and you do have buildings there that all you're trying to do is kind of maintain them and what goes on right around them, then maybe you're going to say less about the new construction that can happen. And with respect to the buildings that are there too, there's flexibility in terms of the protection you put over them. So when Dallas said that staff reviews all applications for the conservation district, we may not do that. We may say that the demolition of a contributing structure in a district goes to the historical commission for review. We may want that to be a higher bar. I think particularly of Friedmanstown, where there are a few buildings. And while we're on the topic of that, I want to share one other drawing, just to reiterate the situation. And this is, I don't mean to pick on Friedmanstown, but since it was a national district and since we have a map, this is a map I made. I took the underlying document here is the map from the National Registered Nomination form for that district. Everything that you see with a dark gray over it has been demolished, and there's something there in its place, or there's nothing there. And so you see how few of the resources are there. Yet we feel there is enough there to make possibly a small historic district, and to also we'd like to maybe consider, I think I'm hearing that we'd like to consider a historic district there as well. Mr. Lynn, I don't know if I answered that thoroughly. Do you have another thought about that?
Yeah, I guess my question is not so much, I completely agree with preserving the historic structures there and doing, and like Project Row houses or something like that to highlight that impact in the community. It's really a question of when we start to kind of legislate architecture, which, in that document that you just showed, it was everything from building lines, architectural style to what, building height and what have you. And, that to me is when it sort of restricts the flexibility of the community to adapt to changing housing needs from the broad city as a whole. So, for example, would you be able to build an apartment complex there, and even if it was like, let's say, a workforce housing complex or affordable housing complex, it seems like if we're using conservation district and regulating architectural styles, well, of course, an apartment complex never would have been built there and never can be built in that kind of sort of shotgun house style. So it's just, that's kind of my question, like, are you regulating land use at that point to block certain types of densification efforts, or you know, let's say adding more greater sidewalk depth? You know, that's another thing that it regulates, is like, okay, well, you can't have a certain amount of sidewalk, you know, setbacks and what have you. So that's kind of my overall question.
Thank you. And I know Zion's got her hand up and may want to address that, but Mr. Liu, I wrote down your quote from yesterday because I thought it was very poignant. You said, do not fossilize the existing do not fossilize the existing single family stock. And we don't want to do that. We don't want to, I mean, that's not even on the first, what's on the radar is, can we make a conservation district in the city? And that's all this task force wants to do, is say, you know, yes, we'd like to just make it possible that in a certain area, one be created. To that point, it's what that neighborhood or that area would like. And so I really took to heart what you said. There's no doubt that, I mean, I understand affordability. And Matt, there's a fella named Max, and his last name is escaping me, that wrote a book called Why Preservation Matters. He wrote it in 2016 on the 50th anniversary of the passage of the National Historic Preservation Act. And at that time, he said it's important that historic preservation do two more things in order for it to remain relevant. And that is to address the issue of affordable housing and to address the issue of sustainability of the impacts of climate change. So for sure, we want to do what the city needs and what a neighborhood needs. And if somebody wants to fossilize existing single family stock, so to speak, or fossilize in general, that's what a historic district is for, if that makes sense.
Right. So to that end, Mr. Liu, let's dream together, because I want to share with you kind of how those two visions aren't inherently in conflict with each other, right? So the beauty of a conservation district as opposed to the historic district is, it's not that a conservation district is essentially legislating that you have to mimic a style or a format, but it allows for an approval process and a review process to moderate and temper appropriateness, right? And in the same way that some kind of behind the scenes stuff, I've seen plans to take existing homes and do adaptive reuse with some of these shotgun homes, right? And they've actually expanded the back to have additional structures, additional square footage. They've had one driveway, so they didn't have to increase the number of curb cuts. They had a single driveway. They expanded the back of the house. They maybe added something that's in one of the alleys, and that allowed for potentially 2 or 3 units to be able to coexist, but not change the visual you get when a tourist is walking down a main thoroughfare and the place looks and feels historic. They don't see a 4-story next to a 100-year-old 1-story. It's just more of a moderating of appropriateness, not a legislating of use. It's not at all land use. It's not at all zoning. It's whatever we make it. And then there's a review process to say, you know what, that's a really good exception. I'll tell you this, 100%. Everyone I've talked to who has information about what they want to do, what they would hope and they aspire for with the community, what the community has told me as one of many representatives in that community, is that they want affordable housing. That is one of the asks. And people are trying to figure out how to do it. They're taking some of these 2-story historic homes and subdividing them internally to have what doesn't look like a 4-plex on the outside. It looks like a single structure, and it has essentially the historic structure on the outside, but they are retrofitting the inside to be co-ops in some ways. And so there's clever ways to do this on certain streets, in certain blocks and things like that. Some of them, they do want it to be 100% historic because they're historic now and they want to keep it that way. What they want to prevent is this person has their historic home and someone puts a commercial enterprise right next to it, and it's just not consistent with the ethos of the neighborhood. So affordable housing is actually a primary activator. So I want everyone to understand and accept that this is not to prevent that. It's to ensure that there is a set of guidelines that is adhered to so that it's not uncontrolled.
Sorry to, I don't want to speak out of turn or take up too much of everyone's time, but let's say within the, I think the question is really about enforcement. And so if we were to look at another district, historic or conservation district, for example, such as Audubon Place, the historic guidelines there speak about porches, speak about building heights and things like that. And while, yes,
I imagine it's a two-man job.
while yes, it is true that, you know, on paper it doesn't preclude affordable housing, but because of things like limiting the height of your building, limiting and, you know, forcing like a certain amount of space to be, you know, outdoor porches and that kind of stuff, and then the land value is what it is. It's like it, you know, the economics and the sort of density that you can do there basically preclude affordability. So, you know, Friedmanstown is, I understand, you know, it because you don't want to have erasure of this sort of important part of Houston's legacy, but in other parts of the city where there have been conservation districts, the way that these conservation sort of standards have been applied, even if from a, you know, on paper standpoint doesn't preclude the ability to do affordable housing, from a de facto standpoint, having all of these design standards does actually do it.
Let me just address that. Thank you. No, it's okay that you're speaking, and I do want to get done in an hour. But I think that you mentioned that exists in Houston. Well, Houston doesn't have any conservation districts today. Those restrictions you speak of are really coming from the historic districts, and the historic districts, you know, like Heights, for example, the one that has the most thorough guidelines set. It has a floor to area ratio per lot and lot coverage per lot. But that is a historic district, Mr. Liu, and that would be very different. Quite Dallas is the Dallas website. It's a quite different thing altogether. I want to be respectful and ask Mr. Friedman if you would like to speak. I see your hand.
Roman, sorry, this is staff member Terrence Jackson. Roman, we had a question before Mr. Friedman.
Okay.
Can I read it? Sorry, Mr. Friedman, we'll get to you in a second. I want to read this question from cdavis.arbic. The question is, architecture and landscapes are reflections of the people and the cultures that established them. How do we use this process to protect the needs of all residents in the areas, as well as protect and maintain property interests?
And that's a key. Thank you for that, Mr. Davis. And for Terrence for interjecting there. That's somewhat the job of this task force, and I'm glad you brought that up, because, you know, that's a delicate mess. For example, what role do economic incentives play in this picture? And so I feel that the enabling legislation that I'd like to see this task force to get behind merely says it's possible to make these districts. And then I think it should we should allow that for some flexibility should a neighborhood want some incentives that we might try to adopt with that specific district. So the way to use the process is to create a conservation district that meets the needs of the residents. So it's so the way you do it is that all we're doing is passing an amendment to the city ordinance that says you can make a district. And then we must assiduously work with the community to figure out what the needs are, and as creatively as we possibly can within the confines of the law, give them a good district and protect the resources that matter, and really the story of a place. So I'm not suggesting that that's the hard part of this and that question. But by not having them in this city with our historic preservation ordinance being restricted to only the creation of a historic district, which requires all the buildings be over a certain age, and we look for other things. It's a good tool. We just want to add another tool to our toolkit that to address that deep question, Mr. Davis. Would you like to make any, or do you have any thoughts on that?
Well, yeah, my only point to it had to do with the opportunity to address the conflicts that have been suggested earlier and that Mr. Liu was beginning to speak to in his comment, that there are private property interests that need to be maintained. And then there are overall community interests that also need to be maintained, particularly in communities that are undergoing gentrification. And what we work towards is not just avoiding displacement of people, but also displacement of culture. So unlike a historic district, we're not trying to create a historic Williamsburg, if you will, where people running around and living their lives as if we're going to costume it up, you know? That's not the point. And you do want to attract value to a community based on its heritage. So there is a historic component that makes an area valuable for visitation from the outside, for people to spend money, to build character, to create a sense of place, using history as a primary element in establishing place. But I think conceptually, it has to be clearly understood that a conservation district versus a historic district are two fundamentally different things, and that the opportunities that a conservation district brings are multiple. And so what might be appropriate in one community that's undergoing gentrification, like the 5th Ward or the 3rd Ward that they're trying to deal with, might be very different in another community in terms of what they're trying to do. And just to begin to make it clear that it is about place, and it is about using history as a unique identifier of place as a tool for regulating stability based on community needs and preferences. So that's what I was trying to ask, and make sure that that's what this group is all about, and kind of monitor that progress from the point of view of my role with the Livable Cities Committee.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Mr. Friedman.
Thank you, Roman. A couple things. I keep coming up with new questions as I hear more people talk, but the idea of providing incentives to live up to the regulations of the conservation district, I think, is an excellent idea. I know on the affordable side, we could definitely use some incentives to kind of live up to the ideals we need to for our neighborhoods. Second, I'm trying to still kind of wrap my mind around the difference between historical and conservation. And Zion mentioned about not having commercial next to single family. But could you give me a couple actual examples that would not be architectural, landscaping, that can all fall into historical. So what could be something that would be outside of historical, be a conservation district item?
Oops. Roman, I think you're muted.
I was, but sorry, you were going to say something?
I didn't know if he was addressing me directly, but speaking of the commercial next to the residential, it's not that one wouldn't want commercial next to residential. It's the planning and forethought that goes the same way you would develop a master plan community and you wouldn't have a major thoroughfare next to the frontages of houses with yards. You would put a buffer in between them. The intention is with a conservation district, you get to have some intention about what works together, what fits together. Not that it's the usage or not would be in conflict with each other. But I didn't understand the last part of your question, Mr. Friedman.
What other examples would be something that would be specifically conservation district compared to a historical district? A historical district, I'm quite familiar with. I've managed historical buildings, right. So I'm still trying to wrap my mind around exactly the difference between the
two. So historic district would say that, are you familiar with the Yates Museum, the Yates House in Friedmanstown?
I am.
Okay, so a historic district says that that house can't ever be touched, and that can exist. And then you overlay on top of that a conservation district, and that actually says that the empty lot next to the Yates house can become something other than a residential property. It can become anything it wants to be, but it should be moderated in that it doesn't essentially encroach upon the adjacent structures in massing, in placement, in a lot of the things that were on the checklist actually that Roman had shared in his window. And then those things are actually up to each individual district to decide that these are the 3 or 4 important things that are relevant in this district. I heard someone mention porches. This isn't saying that we have to have porches on every house to match the porch of the Yates house. This is saying that you can do new construction, you can add on, you can build and do all these different things. You can put a new house on that lot, but it has to fit inside of a certain set of essentially parameters, not even full design guidelines. Honestly, it's short of that. But historic district tells you no more than anything on what you can do to your exterior. Conservation district gives you tools and incentives to do things in a way that creates a cohesive fabric. And it's essentially just creating, when you do all the infill development, it's essentially, it feels like a master planned development as opposed to a random scattershot of things that have zero cohesiveness to it and are all competing at the face and the lot line and the styles and the architecture and things like that would essentially erase the real culture of this place, right? If you put only modern structures, which I, by the way, love modern structures. I live in a very modern stucco house, so I'm not opposed to that. But if you put an entirely modern stucco house next to the Yates Museum, is that consistent? Is that desirable from the community? And it allows the community to speak to what its culture is and what it should be going forward without restricting and saying no development should go here because it's precious and it shouldn't be touched. So it allows things to not be so precious, but to be respectful is essentially, it's that type of threshold. Historic districts are saying you must meet this standard and you must confine to these boundaries, and a conservation district says be respectful.
Thank you, Zion. I think I saw still. Is it Mr. Friedman? Go right ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to respond. Thank you very much for that explanation. I appreciate it. The other thing I had a question, and I don't want to get down in the weeds right now if that's not where we're going to be. But for, say, a conservation district, we're talking about the Yates house. Could there be a district that was maybe just that house and the lot surrounding it, or are you talking about bigger areas? I guess what size of an area would be defined in this type of district?
I think that's up to us to decide with this enabling legislation. I'd like to see it be able to be small or big, really. I mean, we have right now a historic district proposal for a new historic district that is about 8 lots or something like that, 9 lots, mostly owned by one person. But that flexibility of the district being able to make it big or small, I have found to be meaningful, especially given, and remember thinking about the amount of encroachment on some neighborhoods and how little significant maybe fabric, if you will, is there. So I think it's up to us. And speaking of that, I wanted to, oh, sorry, Mr. Friedman, you still have your hand up. To the size question, I think we would decide that with the task force. And I wanted to share this page from the city of Dallas. It just summarizes some zoning tools, because we don't have zonings, that's a different issue, but it just talks about the conservation district here. The regulations are determined by the neighborhood and include a minimum, they do include minimum development here. development architectural standards. So anyway, there's just so much flexibility in how you do that. That's something I wanted to share with you. And I had one other item. Let's see if I can put my finger on it. Well, sure. I'll tell you what I'll jump to now if I can get it up. Where are we? Here. Give me 1 second.
Hey, Roman, while you look for that, this is staff member Terrence Jackson again. Mr. Davis, excuse me, made a comment that says, historic district says thou shall. Conservation district says thou may within limits.
Important clarification so that we can, that's right. And then, like, for example, this committee could determine, this task force may determine the level of the regulation so that an alteration to a building in the district might just need consultation with city staff, historic staff, for example, or it might require a certificate of appropriateness. I think that's up to us to decide. Just remember, this is, y'all know this is a task force, so we have an objective, and I've been asked to try to get something in middle of July, middle of January, to this, that out of this task force. And so to that end, I just want to share, and this should have a draft written behind it, and I'm sorry it doesn't, but this is nothing but some draft language. But I want to let you know that I've began to just kind of draft a very basic document that's there, and this is just a draft form. But anything you've seen today, I'm happy to send to the task force members. And we've approached 403. In my mind, I was hoping with this. I'm sorry, we have a question from Suvita. All right, Suvita, you have your hand up, please. Go ahead.
Hello, everyone. Yes, in the interest of time, we may have to wrap this up. But I do want to mention that the most important thing to remember is why. The first question, always we have to define why we need conservation districts. Once we define that, what are we trying to do and why do we want conservation districts, that must be defined. And once we do that, then we figure out, okay, what do we want to have within these conservation districts? Once we have the why, then we can think about different things that this can cover. And because City of Houston does not have zoning, we do have to be very careful in what goes within the conservation district framework. So during the next meeting, we will have this whole structure built up for all of you to kind of follow. And then in the next meeting, we will talk about different elements that are sensitive for a certain area like Friedman's Town or Emancipation. We'll talk about different elements, and then we can discuss which elements could be part of that framework or which elements could be included in defining if an area can apply for that conservation districts. So that's going to be the framework we are going to establish for the next meeting. We really appreciate all of you participating. And thank you, Roman, for giving me an opportunity to speak.
Sure. Thank you, Savita. So to that end, I'd like to offer that, first of all, thank you to everyone. Y'all all responded to that doodle poll, which allowed us to pick this window to meet. I would like to send out another doodle poll, if it's okay with the task force members. If it's okay with the task force members, I would like to meet, say, about 3 weeks from now. Is that, if that'll work for everybody, because I do want to see us move forward rather quickly. And of course, we're approaching the holiday season. So I'll send out another doodle poll shortly with some suggested times. This time I wanted to meet rather quickly, so I limited it to 2 windows. If it's helpful, I can put, or 2 days, I'm sorry. I can put like 3 days in there. That poll really worked, although we didn't, I did see that Mr. Abraham joined the meeting for a little bit. So we did have.
Yes, that's right.
And I don't think, did Omar or Mr. Federland ever make it in?
No,
Okay.
we did not have them online. We did not have 3 members on the.
Him up to date. Task force members, any final questions? If not, I just want to say thank you so much. Again, on my other screen, I had it to share with you, but I'm Roman McAllen, and my email address is like all other Houston email addresses, but it's Roman.McAllen, like McAllen, Texas. And I'll state it here for the record in case you need it. My phone number at the office is 832-393-6557. That's 832-393-6557. That phone is usually forwarded to my cell phone. And I'll take any final questions, or if anybody needs to sign off. Thank you very much for joining this meeting today.
Hey, Roman, one last thing. Would we be able to see the draft that you came up with before the next meeting?
Oh, I just got a note from the legal department that said they must have been listening and said don't send out any drafts. I'll tell you, I'm happy to talk about that document for you and tell you how I came up with it, David. And it is probably just a hybrid of that City of Denton Municipal Code ordinance, though with some changes. I'd like to call you. I tried to reach you earlier today. I'm happy to discuss that with you further, and just apparently don't want to send out any kind of draft yet.
Roman, this is Kim Mickelson. Since I made that comment, yeah, and I understand, please, from the committee's point of view, we'll be of course happy to share documents with you as they evolve. I haven't seen this draft, and we have some protocol in the legal department, just that we put certain disclaimers on documents that, it hasn't gone through any official process yet. And so we'll just make sure all of that's taken care of. And then, yes, you will see it. I don't know when your next meeting is offhand yet, but so yeah, don't worry. We're not leaving you in the dark or to the very end.
Absolutely not. Thank you, Kim, for joining. And Mr. Abraham, that was because first of all, we are all working. Everyone at the city that I know is working. I don't know what happened with COVID, but our workloads just seem to have tripled. And I've had that draft sitting around for a while. And so what we can guarantee is after this, at least the second meeting, let's have some more talk, and I'll run that by Kim and put draft all over it and things like that. But we do not have any set agenda here. I just hope that we get a consensus that the idea that we may pass an ordinance, as I said, pass an ordinance that enables someone to make a district if they want to. So there you have it.
Thank you.
With that, thank you all for joining us, and sorry to keep you over by 10 minutes. Roman, thank you so much for handling the meeting.
Oh, no, thank you all so much. And thank you all so much, very, very much, and for your cooperation. We'll see you soon.
And we request everyone to participate in our public engagement activities on Let's Talk Houston. Thank you. Bye. Have a nice evening.
And Caitlin, if you want to stop the recording, I think that'd be okay.